Well, صباح الخير. أهلا وسهلا. Good morning and welcome to the University of Texas at Austin. My name is Sofian Merabet and I teach in the Department of Anthropology here. As the organizer of In and Out of Syria, a conference on the war and the refugee crisis, I would like to first thank a number of individuals and range of academic units across this campus which have made this event possible in the first place. Shortly after my brief introduction, Randy Diehl, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, will extend his welcome to you, as will Karin Wilkins, the Director of UT's Center for Middle Eastern Studies. I will then finish up this first half hour, and we are a little bit late already, by giving some introductory remarks to the conference. The idea of organizing a conference on what is currently unfolding in and around Syria found first resonance within the Center of Middle Eastern Studies and its director. However, I would have been unable to organize anything without the financial support of the following academic units across campus, namely the College of Liberal Arts Dean's Office, the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, evidently, the Center for European Studies, the South Asia Institute, the Department of Anthropology, the Law School's Rappaport Center for Human Rights and Justice, the Humanities Institute, the Center for Women's and Gender Studies, the Department of History, the Department of Sociology, the Department of French and Italian, the Department of Germanic Studies, the Program in International Relations and Global Studies, and the Department of Geography and the Environment. A large number of individuals has been instrumental in helping me put this together. While I unfortunately cannot express my gratitude to everybody right now due to obviously the lack of time, I would like to thank my colleague Adriana Dingman from the Anthropology Office for her tireless work in keeping numbers straight and making sure that all invited guests were taken care of appropriately. The chairman of my own department, Tony Di Fiore, has been supportive in hosting this conference from the very beginning, and for that I thank him very much. As well as my colleagues, Douglas Bio from European Studies, Kamran Ali from the South Asia Institute, and Sue Heinzelman from the Center for Women's and Gender Studies. And I need to mention here that it is the center's Nancy Award who, upon receiving 4 photographs of mine, designed on the spot the conference poster and the program, and thank you for doing that. As some of you may have noticed, with the exception of one, all departments, centers, institutes, and programs listed as co-sponsors are formally part of UT's College of Liberal Arts. They are the ones that, in spite of all budgetary constraints, were not only enthusiastic about the idea of hosting this conference in their midst, they also contributed financially with whatever means they had. And it is therefore my honor to ask Randy Diehl, the Dean of what we call here COLA, to give his welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Sofian. Is this on? Okay. I want to commend and congratulate Sofian for taking the lead in organizing this important conference. I also want to congratulate him for having been promoted to associate professor this very week. Welcome to all of you. We have folks here, obviously, from the UT campus, from around the U.S., and international scholars as well. This topic, the war in Syria, the ensuing refugee crisis, is perhaps the most urgent, most important international topic we're dealing with today. And my understanding is this is probably the first conference that has been organized to address these specific issues. With that particular focus. And as Sofian said, it's a liberal arts focus. You know, at a time when I find myself having to defend and justify what we do in the College of Liberal Arts by people who think that where you if you want to get a job you have to go into business or engineering. I would point to these sets of topics with a very strong focus on the social sciences and the humanities to underscore the importance, the critical importance of the liberal arts in this day and age. Sofian mentioned a large group of sponsors and co-sponsors. In fact, that's one of the largest groups that I recall in many instances of introducing conferences. We may have 3 and 4 co-sponsors, but you have almost everybody in the College of Liberal Arts. And that underscores the importance, the critical importance of this topic. As a dean, I'm invited to welcome, to kind of kick off the conference. I rarely am able to stay, and I really regret that in this instance. This promises to be an extremely stimulating discussion. On that note, again, I welcome all of you.
Thank you. Karin, please. Let me introduce to you Karin Wilkins, the director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies.
Thank you. I am really pleased to add my warm welcome to you, particularly those of you who are not here in Austin regularly. We're very glad that you're here. I want to point out that not only is this a very significant topic and that attracted a lot of different groups collaborating across the university, but it's really a testament to Sofian's brilliance and networking skills that had so many groups willing to come together and be part of this today. We all understand the significance of the issues, and coming from a communication and development perspective, the humanitarian issues are incredibly significant. I write about the politics of statistics, so I always hesitate to use them. But we have more than 13.5 million people requiring humanitarian assistance, 4.6 million refugees, mostly in the Middle Eastern region. We should be taking more in the United States. There's a problem here in understanding and sympathy. 6.6 million displaced within Syria. And when the BBC, as of yesterday, says things like, world powers have agreed to a tentative deal to try to bring about a cessation of hostilities and allow more access for humanitarian aid, for a communications scholar, this brings to mind all that we're missing. We're missing context. We all need much more context about what's happening in the region, and not just since 2011, but prior to that, the role of the United States, Russia, Turkey. These are all very important, and one of the missions for the Center for Middle Eastern Studies is to do what we can to try to add that context so we can educate people who can then potentially make more informed decisions, be more actively engaged. And this is the contribution of the Academy. We have an obligation to share resources, to offer this context through events like these, listening and engaging. This is where understanding the humanity and the significance of the issues that you're talking about today, we cannot be silent. And working to make that change is something beginning with events like these and then taking these kinds of events and building on these. And for that, I want to thank you for being willing to take the time to be here, all of you, and for taking the time to share your expertise and to engage in this. Thanks for your time.
Well, as mentioned before, the idea about hosting this conference started with a suggestion I had and a proposal I submitted to the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. It quickly generated momentum amongst colleagues here at UT, especially in the wake of the widely mediatized European crisis surrounding the refugees. For those of us whose professional and oftentimes personal links to Syria had been much older, the war and later the refugees had been topics of concern at least since the spring of 2011, when many of the events that led to the current situation began. Although I never formally conducted research in Syria, my personal involvement with the country started over 20 years ago, when I spent extensive periods of time traveling, often by foot or hitchhiking through areas around Damascus and Aleppo, all the way to the coastal plains of Latakia and back east to the deserts along the Euphrates and the shores of the Tigris on the border with Turkey and Iraq. I continued to visit Syria even after I lived in Lebanon for 3 years, when I conducted research, ethnographic research among queer-identified men, some of whom originated from Syria. My direct involvement with Syria came to an end after I entered the country for the last time, which was actually in the spring of 2012. The popular uprising had begun a year earlier, and a ghostly atmosphere enveloped the highway from the border with Lebanon to Damascus. The capital itself was under the spell of a perpetual state of emergency, where the eerie staccato of pedestrian lights, which always went on when one crossed the emptied streets, was akin to a spark plug firing and almost mimicked mutely the ever-approaching salves that one could hear being fired on the outskirts of the city. When I returned to Beirut the next year, Lebanon had been teeming with Syrians, including some friends and acquaintances I had made over the years. My research quickly shifted to hospitality as a philosophical concept and to the sociological notion of the stranger by focusing on the discourse of familiar phobia and the various strange aspirations gay Syrian refugees express in terms of language and bodily practices in and around Beirut. Most of them had been persecuted in Syria due to their sexual orientation, and some due to their political views. Following their day-to-day lives in and around professional and intimate settings, I started reconstructing the fallacies of the ordinary refugee experience as manifest in and around several Beiruti neighborhoods. I examined how these refugees contest and appropriate along literal and symbolic lines a hostile urban fabric they are compelled to navigate on a daily basis. While all of them were officially registered with the UNHCR, some of these men sought and actually received political asylum in Western countries, mostly in Western Europe. And in particular, I tracked the life of one individual I had met under completely different circumstances in Damascus more than a decade earlier. And in so doing, I focused not only on the way in which he navigated the violent realities of a refugee between Damascus first, later on he actually went to Dubai, Beirut, and eventually Rotterdam in the Netherlands, but also on how he and his friends made discursively sense of place and its infrastructure in an increasingly globalized world where the experience of an asylum-seeking refugee has become a pivotal one. Albeit with different emphases, most of the panelists today may have similar stories to tell, stories that draw attention to their respective scholarly but also personal involvement with Syria, the war, and the refugees. Some of us present here today met during last year's meeting of the American Anthropological Association when Ann Stahl, the former chairwoman of the AAA's Executive Program Committee, asked me as an outgoing member of that committee to organize some sort of a panel that engages with the current situation in and around Syria. As the program back in November 2015 stated, this special event was intended to shed light on the unfolding Syrian civil war and the resulting refugee crisis. The idea was to bring together anthropologists whose professional expertise was either the study of contemporary Syria or the present-day Syrian refugee crisis. And based on this expertise, the goal was to provide a forum for an open and exploratory conversation among interested parties, something we hoped would also resonate with participants of last year's annual meeting of the Middle East Studies Association, MESA, that was also taking place in Denver at the same time. So bringing this timely discussion on the subject of the war in Syria and the refugee crisis to our professional association would enable us, we believed, to reflect on possibilities for engagement and directions for future work and collaborations. So part of that future work and collaboration is today's conference, which has also garnered interest, I am happy to report, among the editors of the series in public cultures of the Middle East and North Africa at Indiana University Press. This will allow us to publish most of the papers that will be delivered today, as well as a few others by authors who could not travel to Austin this time, in an edited volume we think will be widely used in classrooms and other educational settings. Although we are faced with one of the greatest human tragedies following the end of World War II, with an internal death toll some experts argue to have reached 500,000 individuals, there have only been very few academic conferences in the US so far that focus on the war in Syria and the resulting refugee crisis. Most of them are concerned with issues regarding policy and the spurious question, what can we do to end the war in Syria? Notwithstanding the most imperious or mostly imperious use of the personal pronoun we, I do not discount the relevance of policy studies. This conference, however, focuses on the human dimensions of the war and draws on the scholarly knowledge of US-based and international academics in the fields of the humanities and the social sciences. Established scholars, junior researchers, and practitioners in the field with a variety of backgrounds regarding Syria and refugee studies will speak on subjects that range from the politics of nationalism and sectarianism in Syria to the collective and individual experiences of Syrian refugees in neighboring Arab countries, as well as in Turkey and in Europe. The conference is divided up in 3 panels with a total of 9 speakers who will talk for 30 minutes each. The panels are chaired by 3 graduate students, Kate Maddox from Middle Eastern Studies, and Ege Sultan and Dina Rabia, both from the Anthropology department. The first panel, The Nation and the War, features 4 speakers and is divided in 2 parts by a short coffee break. The panel's discussion is Jason Brownlee, who is on the faculty of the Department of Government here at UT. He will close the panel with a questions and answers period. And after lunch, we will reconvene for our second panel on Syrian journeys of displacement, which will feature 3 speakers and Ben Brower from the UT History Department as a discussant and a moderator for the Q&A. Our third and last panel today focuses on Palestinian refugees and the war and includes 2 speakers, one of whom will be present via Skype. The discussant for that panel will be Stephanie Mulder from the Departments of Art and Art History, as well as of Middle Eastern Studies here at UT. And now, finally, let me welcome you all to our first panel of In and Out of Syria, a conference on the war and the refugee crisis. Thank you.